How's it going, everyone? Welcome in or welcome back to the third episode of the Cross CTS PlayStation podcast. This is a weekly podcast about all things PlayStation that releases every Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern. You can follow us on Twitter at cross_CTS, and I'd appreciate a like on the video if you like what you see. You can always subscribe to the channel so you're always caught up on all of our new content and anything that we're looking to put out. So, with the shilling and intros out of the way, we'll get into what we've been playing. Sort of try to condense the show a little bit. I'm thinking lately that some of the first episode was far too long. I'm still trying to narrow down the structure and the content, but try to go in the pattern of let you guys know what I've been playing. We'll go over some news segments, and then usually whatever the episode is titled will be our main topic of discussion, like it is today. We're going to talk about my first 8 to 10 hours with Horizon Forbidden West, and then we wrap the show up. So if anybody's listening, I'll put the timestamps down into the description of the video. That'll let you know when the news starts and when the topic of the show, or the Platinum Trophy topic as we call it around here, starts. That way, if you guys are only interested in what the video is titled, or if you're interested in hearing some news of the week or what I've been playing, those timestamps will also be there. So if you guys want to check that out and skip around, feel free. But if you want to just watch the whole thing, that's okay too. So start about what I've been playing this week. Obviously, I've been dabbling into Forbidden West. We'll talk about that later. And then the only other game I really played with this week was trying to platinum Nier Replicant. My goal was, when I started it, to be able to platinum it before Forbidden West came out, but it's just a really annoying trophy list, so I didn't quite do it. I beat 3 of the 5 endings, and it'll just be something I get back to in the long run, because I don't think it's something I've gotten on to too much on this show yet in the first couple episodes, but I'm a bit obsessed with hunting trophies in games. I think I have somewhere in the mid 200s for platinum trophies. If you guys want to check out my profile on like PSN profiles, my username is JonesyWVU16. You guys can get a feel for games that I'm playing and just how anal retentive I am about getting platinum trophies. But yeah, so much the same stuff I talked about last week with Nier Replicant. The game is fun. It sort of levels off at a certain point where combat's no longer enjoyable. I appreciate the type of storytelling that they do in Nier games, where subsequent playthroughs sort of reveal alternate perspectives on the story, so it just kind of fills things in. So, but that being the remake itself is old, but the original game is old as well. We won't go into it too much, but the other game I've been spending time with will be discussed later on. So, but okay, so moving into the news this week, we have 8 newsworthy items in the world of PlayStation. So let's get into it with number 1. So according to Wired Productions, the developers of the indie horror game Martha is Dead, the game will need to be censored on PS5 and PS4. It will remain in its original state on Xbox and PC. This will cause the release of the physical copy of the game to be delayed. This is an interesting decision when games like Mortal Kombat and The Last of Us exist on the console. Sony has made no comment on the situation. So this just kind of goes in line with kind of some weird censorship issues that Sony has had lately. And there doesn't seem to be any real rhyme or reason to the games they pick. Because, yeah, like you have games like Mortal Kombat where people are being like flayed alive and their spines ripped out, but that's acceptable. But you have this indie horror game where allegedly there's some sort of like face tearing or some sort of grotesque action on a dead body, which is fine. I mean, the game is labeled for mature, which is the steps that the developers need to take. So it just seems odd that Sony is forcing their censorship on this small indie studio while the other console makers aren't. So kind of hope it's not something that moves forward. we have the rating system for a reason, so things like this are properly classified. Now, obviously, there are some things that are sort of indefensible, and Sony has every right to censor whatever they want on their platform. These developers can choose to put it on there or not. So, but I think it sets a pretty dangerous precedent, because you can look at the things that they censor and then all the things that they don't and ask if that is accepted by them, because basically they're banning or censoring certain content but allowing other content. So that leads you to believe that the content that they're not censoring is content that they are okay with. So I think they just kind of put themselves in this weird situation for little to no gain and for bad publicity and for souring relationships with indie developers. But with no comment from them and the developers being sort of cagey and the actual content being censored, being sort of up in the air still, it's hard to really tell. Maybe it comes out and it's something where they're like, I don't know, who knows, gutting a baby or so, something that is clearly over the line. But right now, when it sounds like it's not anything that's not already on the console or something worse isn't already on the console, it's hard to sort of see where Sony's coming from in that respect. But we'll keep our eyes on that. The game will come out as planned in digital copies, so the only thing I think is this is just going to drive sales of this game. People are going to be interested on PC and Xbox to see what has been cut from the PlayStation version. So I think by them censoring it, it's only going to garner this game that maybe nobody would have ever even heard of, an immense amount of attention that I'm sure the publishing team over there is super thrilled about. But we'll keep tabs on that, and when it does come out, we'll note some of the censorship. Number 2, after a prolonged absence from the platform, Cyberpunk 2077 has returned to PlayStation platforms. The PS5 version of the game released this past week with many upgrades that leave the game in a better state than its disastrous initial launch. In a mea culpa, CD Projekt Red, the once darling developers of the Witcher series, have offered a free demo of up to 5 hours of gameplay. Seemingly too late and amongst a hotbed of hotly anticipated AAA titles, it remains to be seen if the game can get back to a fraction of the excitement it had prior to release. So we always knew this was coming. They've been toiling away on making Cyberpunk 2077 an actual playable game on console platforms, really, because when it launched, it worked fine on PC and the console. I mean, I platinumed this game on PS4 Pro. I don't think the game is nearly as good as people were hoping for, obviously, even in its best state. And I think that this just kind of seems like too little too late. I think most people have already forgotten about this game. And with games like Horizon and Elden Ring coming out right at the same time, it seems like they wanted to get this little bump, and then they knew no one would be talking about it again because of the two massive releases coming out around it. And I also think that clearly this is being done so they can prime us for some sort of DLC content that they've been promising. So it just seems like, I don't know, this game will always kind of have a sour taste in my mouth. I don't think it was very good to begin with. And the disastrous state at which they released it, it seems like CD Projekt Red is in some real trouble going forward, unless they can sort of do the No Man's Sky approach and sort of fix this game slowly but surely, and then garner the respect that they deserve moving into what I assume will be The Witcher 4, or whatever they decide to call it. But that brings up the fact that I believe the director on Wild Hunt started, or they announced that his new studio was started, something Wolves, I'm not sure. But in his comments about opening the studio, he basically wanted his studio to be a place where developers can regain the love for the craft. So it sounds like things at CD Projekt Red aren't as golden as they were in the Witcher 3 era, and they sort of had this slow, steady rise that popped off with The Witcher, and then they quickly shot themselves in the foot with the disaster that was Cyberpunk. And part of me thinks that maybe this game didn't need to be released until now, but they forced it out the door 15 months ago or something like that, in November of 2020, I think. So uh, it just was a mess, and I don't think it'll take a Herculean effort if this game is ever looked at positively, because you're gonna have so many people with the gifs and the tweets and the just the crazy shit that was happening where police would appear behind you, you'd turn around and they'd be gone. So um, I think they have to nurture this game, and if they can get it back to a respectable state, I think they'll be able to launch The Witcher 4 and have some sort of audience trust that they can build on. But I think it's a long way back, and hopefully they can do it. I'm not a big fan of any of their games really, but you hate to see a developer that makes games that people love so much really shit the bed. But much like BioWare, they really need to prove themselves at this point. We can't just accept them based on their past goodwill. We need to hold them to account. And if you're really pissed off about Cyberpunk, then don't buy The Witcher 4. That's the only way, unless they show market improvement with all these fixes. But until you stop buying their games, they'll keep up this shady shit, and they'll keep cutting corners and doing all that they need to do. I mean, what's it to them if they make a shitty game and make a ton of money? I mean, so you just got to speak with your wallet in that respect. But I would say look for a DLC announcement sometime in the summer, so they can ride the success of this new update, and they'll try to launch that into bringing Cyberpunk back to a respectable state. Number 3 is a few small tidbits of Horizon news, undoubtedly coinciding with the release of Horizon Forbidden West. Sony has said that they will plant up to 288,000 trees for players that collect a certain in-game trophy titled Reach the Daunt, which I have already achieved, so it's early enough in the game where if you're invested at all, you'll reach it pretty easily. And additionally, LEGO has announced a collaboration with Horizon with a tall neck LEGO set. The 1,222-piece set will release on May 22nd and will retail for $80. So this is just some kind of cool little content. Sort of shows that Sony and PlayStation view Horizon as one of their top. I mean, at this point, it's got to be top 3, 4 at the worst, along with God of War, Uncharted, Last of Us, and the Spider-Man IP through Insomniac. So it's nice to see them go transmedia without making another movie or a TV show. I'm sure it's coming, to be honest, especially with how I'm sure Forbidden West is going to blow up. But and then they have the VR game Call of the Mountain coming out as well for PSVR 2. So I think we're just getting started in what we see from Horizon. But these products look cool. I'm not a Lego guy whatsoever, but I think this would be something really cool to get and maybe build with my wife, and she's sort of technical like that. So maybe if we switch the podcast to video at some point and this starts to do well enough, maybe the Lego tall neck will be displayed prominently. But just got to be on the lookout for those if you're. And then the tree planting thing is a really good gesture. I mean, yes, I'm sure it's Sony just trying to garner goodwill. And so what? I mean, at a certain point, good actions are good actions, regardless of the intentions at some point, you know. So sort of a utilitarian desire there where the utility of the action is worth the negative consequences. So I guess if I was one of the first 288,000, I helped plant a tree. If not, it's still a good gesture, and I think it ties in really well with the sort of the mythos and the story of the Horizon game. So I think it's a really neat gesture there, and I am glad to see Horizon is getting the sort of respect that it got. I feel like it never really got much of what it deserved because of how close it came to Breath of the Wild, which I think is a vastly inferior game. I think Horizon does almost everything better than Zelda, except for like the climb everywhere thing that everybody comes themselves over. But I think that Horizon 1 is great, and then you'll hear later that I think Forbidden West, at least so far, has done everything better. So I'm sure be on the lookout for more like cross media shit with Horizon, but it's nice to see. And if you're interested, pick up that Lego set on the 22nd and hurry up and reach the dawn so you can help plant some trees. Number 4 is just that Netflix has announced they've purchased the rights to produce a BioShock movie. I guess my first question is just why. I think I love the BioShock series. I especially love the first BioShock, the original, and Infinite. And I think most of these games, especially the first one, it's so much the ending and how you play and how you interact with the world is so determined by what you choose to do with the little sisters, whether you harvest them or let them go. So in a show, it's hard to capture that sort of duality. You sort of have to pick a lane, and at that point, is it really BioShock? I mean, yeah, it's set in Rapture or it's set in Columbia, but I think at a certain point, you can't retell the stories of the game without that choice. And maybe they do a Bandersnatch there, that Black Mirror choose your own adventure style show, but I feel like they want to sort of just shoehorn a story into Rapture because it's popular and do. I just can't see it being good. But maybe it'll be something that they do that coincides with the new BioShock game that I believe will be announced this year. But until then, hopefully, I mean, video game movies are usually bad, but we can always wait and see. But this isn't the first time that companies and directors have been linked to a BioShock project. Kind of seems like they've been wanting to do this basically since the game was released. So this could all end up being nothing, but just be on the lookout for maybe some most likely disappointing news regarding this movie. So another TV news, number 5 is The Last of Us TV show will apparently not air this year. In a question segment on The Hollywood Reporter, Casey Bloys, the head of programming at HBO, stated it's, quote, shooting right now in Canada, ellipses. We haven't announced an on-air date yet, ellipses. It's not 2022. So I think if you've been paying attention to the Last of Us Twitter account, they tweeted out a few weeks ago, or maybe it was a few days ago. Time sort of makes no sense anymore. But that Outbreak Day was going to be in 2003 in the show. So in the game, it skips the 20 years, which would make it 2023. This doesn't really surprise me if they're still shooting, obviously. But you got to compete with the slate of HBO and things like that. But I'm hopeful for this show. I think with HBO really puts out pretty decent quality. I believe there's some of the crew that helped on Chernobyl is involved, which is a great show. And it seems like the people involved really care for the source material. And I guess we can just hope and wait for it in 2023. I think the first sign of whether or not this show is going to be good is the trailer. If the trailer comes out and it's trash, it's going to be disappointing. But I think even from the first trailer, we'll be able to see if they get the mood and then the tension, and then I'm sure they'll tease a clicker or a runner or something like that. But so nothing this year, probably a trailer, like I say later on, but we'll have to wait till 2023 to see what they've done with the story and how it turns out. And then number 6 is in response to posts on Reddit gaming leaks and rumors community about the possibility of God of War Ragnarok being delayed, Jason Schreier of Bloomberg responded with a curt, quote, no, unquote. So I think in last week's episode, one of my predictions, I predicted that God of War Ragnarok would be delayed out of this year. And I still think that that's true. Jason Schreier is a pretty well-known insider in the industry, but he has gotten things wrong like this before. I believe he said Final Fantasy 16 could possibly release last year. So obviously that's not true. And people that he's been talking to very well could be saying that they're committed to releasing this year. But I think every modern big AAA Sony exclusive has been delayed multiple times even at this point. I mean, Uncharted 4 was problematic. They delayed Horizon Forbidden West for avoiding of crunch. The original God of War was delayed. So I just can't see it. But just pointing out to you that people that are way more well connected in this industry and probably know more than I do, say that it's still on track for this year. I'll believe it when it's in my hands and the calendar still says 2022, but I guess we can just wait and see. So if you're hoping for it this year, maybe you'll get lucky, and it'll make me look stupid on one of my predictions. So all we can do is wait and see. Number 7, box office reports estimate that the Uncharted movie has raked in approximately $132.2 million through its opening weekend worldwide. This is enough to cover its production budget, which was bloated due to its protracted development. So this is insane to me. Being a fan of the Uncharted series, this movie just basically seems like the greatest hits. I think I've gotten to the point where I'm old enough now where Tom Holland being a megastar, I just sort of don't get it. I mean, I can't hate on it, though. If people enjoy it, you're free to enjoy whatever the hell you want. It's a movie that I'll probably see once it comes to streaming platforms. I can't see going out to a theater to see this movie, but I'm glad that it's doing well, and I'm sure there'll be a sequel at this point. With it in development for so long and being so troubled, for it to even turn out apparently decent, according to most reviews, is an achievement in and of itself. So good for them that they made their money back, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see a sequel here very soon. But good on them, and then congratulations to everyone involved. So the final news article, our news segment type thing of the week, is number 8. So luckily I record this show on Monday mornings at like 4 a.m. because I'm nocturnal and have a shitty job. But I was able to include this little tidbit on the docket. So after Capcom's teaser timer ran to 0, Street Fighter 6 has officially been announced. Little is known still, other than a brief 40-second-ish trailer showing Ryu, but longtime producer Yoshinori Ono will be involved to some extent, despite his departure from Capcom last year. And they stated at the end of the brief trailer that more information would be revealed in the summer of 2022. This was basically at the end of the Capcom Cup, sort of what I believe we talked about it last week. I'm not sure how things lined up, maybe not, but if we didn't, most of the rumors pointed to either Street Fighter or Resident Evil. It looked like to me that it wasn't Resident Evil, with being that it was coinciding with the Capcom Cup. But I'm not much of a fighting game guy, but I know this is a big deal, especially since Street Fighter V was exclusive to Sony. There was no mention of exclusivity or anything in the trailer. It seems very, very preliminary, and I wonder if, with the more info in summer, if when Sony does their showcase or their state of play around what used to be E3, if that's where we will hear more about that. It'll certainly be at a Sony event, or it'll be at some sort of Evo event, since Sony owns them. But I'd be surprised if it does go back to Xbox, but as of the recording of this, we don't have any confirmation on that it's an exclusive. But so if you're into fighting games, I'm sure that's a pretty big announcement. I know Street Fighter goes all the way back, and you can look forward to hearing more about it in the summer. So that's a quick run through of the pertinent PlayStation news for the week. We'll now move into the Platinum Trophy segment of the week, and that is my early impressions of Horizon Zero Dawn. So I'll kind of start out. Most of my reviews will be spoiler-free, other than maybe brief opening hour snippets. If anybody's interested and they want it, I can record a spoiler cast once I finish the game, and we can involve comments and stuff like that if there are any. But I don't get games early. I'm just some nobody getting 30, 40 views on YouTube videos. So I play the games at the same pace you do. I hate nothing more than like what IGN and other big YouTube channels do, where their reviews launch a week before the game, and the day of the game they're showing you end game content, and they're done. Like, I guarantee you Thursday there will be no more Horizon Forbidden West talk on IGN or on GameStop or any of these big websites, because it'll be Elden Ring time. And then when Elden Ring's done, they'll move on to something else before you've even had a chance to play it. Like, I was searching the internet on Friday when Forbidden West came out, and there was endgame content from popular channels. And I just I don't know how you can connect with viewers on that level. Why would anybody want to engage with that content before they've even played the game? It just doesn't make any sense. So I think we will talk about it on this podcast basically as a normal person would play it. Now, I do spend a lot of time playing games. I can work through a game fairly quickly, but there's no way I'm having Forbidden West finished by the time Elden Ring comes out. So this podcast will not have an Elden Ring for you Elden Ring review for you next week. We'll have a more in-depth discussion on Forbidden West, and I think that's the right approach because you guys didn't get Forbidden West 3 weeks ago. You got it on Friday. You've had it for a weekend. And I think if you're listening to me, you want to hear me talk about basically probably the amount of time you've spent with it. I spent 10 hours with the game. I feel like I'm getting a good hang of it, but I don't know more than that. I'm not going to spend an hour and a half podcast teasing what's going to happen at the end because I don't know. And you guys don't know. So I think we can relate to each other on a shared play experience without having to move on to the next thing right away. Because I don't think Horizon Zero Dawn or not, Horizon Forbidden West should not be completed in a weekend or a couple of sessions. I saw, again, I don't mean to pick on like IGN or GameStop, but they're just sort of the big hitters in the space. But I saw an article where they asked some of the people that worked on the review and the guides for Forbidden West how long it took them to beat it, and one of them said 29 hours. The reviewer, how? Spoilers, I just got out of the Daunt, which is basically the prologue area, and I've been playing the game for 10 hours. So I don't know if it's the structure of how they need to review games or how long they get it to meet embargoes, but you can't experience this game in 29 hours. Unless the game falls off a cliff and everything is point to point, there's no fucking way you can do it in 29 hours. And the highest end was 42. So we will play the game just like you do, and we'll talk the game just like you do. That way we can engage and have a conversation without it feeling like we've already done 2 weeks of coverage before you even got it. So I think that's just going to be our policy. And if we get to a point where it's not going to happen, but if this podcast ever got big enough where we did start getting codes early, I would still follow that policy because it doesn't do a service to you, the audience, to be talking about something that you have no touchstone to. And I think just going forward, we'll always do it this way. And so I guess enough just kind of explanations. I just want to kind of give you guys a heads up because this is the first game that we've sort of gone into impressions and reviews on in this show. I just want to give you guys a brief little rundown on what to expect. And if you're interested in that, you can always come back for other reviews. I'm sure as time goes on and the channel gets a little bigger and maybe I have a little bit more time to focus on this, I can sort of break out different review segments or make supplemental videos talking about the story and things like that. But for right now, they'll usually be contained within the show, and we will play them on release date and give you updates as we go. So with all that out of the way, we'll start talking about my time with Forbidden West. So, like I said earlier, I spent about 10 hours with the game, and so far I'm loving it. The game is gorgeous. I think the environment is probably the best I've seen in a game. It's not as stylized as maybe a Ghost of Tsushima, and I think just because of how mostly dark and dreary that The Last of Us 2 is, you don't really get those beautiful vista moments. Again, I'll keep this as spoiler free as possible. I think mentioning that tall necks exist in the game isn't a spoiler because they were in Zero Dawn. But the first time you get on a tall neck and you just see the vista, it's like, wow. And you can just see for what would be like in-game miles, and Aloy's commenting on it and everything. And, and I think that's probably the thing I've noticed most about this game is that Aloy seems like a more mature and more fleshed out character this time around. And she's very driven for her reason in the game. And I think the voice acting by everyone involved is great. The animations of the characters is better. I think in Zero Dawn, you notice when you'd be having one of the dialogue wheel choice conversations, it almost seemed like two people standing there like marionettes. This time, it actually seems like two people having a real conversation. They emote. Their facial structure changes in reaction to conversations and your choices. And it's one of the few games where I feel like I want to hear every option in those dialogue wheels. Like sometimes in like RPGs, it's just like nonsense. But in just the lore in the world that exists in these games is just so rich that you don't want to skip anything. And I think the other big standout for my first few hours, I think that the two biggest standouts are how well the side quests are integrated and how well they tell stories. We'll get back to that one, but I think what I appreciated about the original, but I really think the prologue in Forbidden West and then some of the main quests in the Daunt, which is the first area you get to. It's within like 90 minutes, so I don't think that's much of a spoiler. But the prologue is a very well scripted, linear, Uncharted type section in a completely open world game, and it's nice to see that they have the chops to do both types of things, because sometimes in open world games the more linear or story guided sections just feel restrictive and they feel janky, and they feel they're never as fun as driving a car through the city, or uh, driving an animal, a robot dinosaur horse cow thing through the Forbidden West. But that just really struck me that they found a way to make a very compelling story driven section and then kind of shit you out into a giant open playground, and then it funnels you back to story segments that are linear, or some story segments that are less linear, where you're sort of tasked with destroying robots or investigating areas and following trails. Um, so far, none of the missions have been repetitive. Maybe I've seen them set up some things where it's going to be sets like the hunting grounds are back from Zero Dawn, basically giving you challenges to learn and use your different weapons, which I appreciate. It has a pretty wide arsenal of weapons, so it's nice to have a system to sort of reward you while it teaches you how to use these certain items. But I think that is by far the thing I've noticed most compared to the original, is that the story missions are much more enjoyable and they're less of just go to point A, fight machines, go to point B, and come back. It's like they have competent traversal. There's interesting things to scan and learn and read. There's good side conversations. There's things in the environment that have little exclamation points above them that provide more context for the area that you're in. So, and that sort of segues into what I think is by far the best thing that Forbidden West has, and that's its side quests. So I think you're doing yourself a real disservice if you just sort of mainline the story. Even from the first 10 hours, I feel like the main story itself is compelling, but you have no real context for anything. So minor spoilers here for basically when you enter the Daunt. They're trying to do this embassy with the tribe out west, with the Karja from the previous game, from Meridian, the main city, and they can't because of various machinations. But it all boils down to these bristleback robots that are inhabiting this quarry work area. And if you follow the main story segment, you eventually destroy the robots and allow things to progress how you would assume, where Aloy can get access to the actual Forbidden West. So that would be what you know. It would be, you do the story missions, you wipe them out, you get to the area that is the gate essentially to the Forbidden West, and then you'd go out of it. But if you find certain side quests, which are easy to find, they're little exclamation points on your map, but you learn that maybe the person in town that is leading is part of the reason why the bristlebacks are here. And the side quests do an amazing job of filling in context for what's going on in the world and what's going on in the main story itself, sort of providing answers to questions that are brought up in the main story that you can still enjoy the main story without this. But if you want to build your full conception of the universe, the side quests are invaluable to that. They essentially, the main story draws the outline and the side quests help color it in. So yes, you still have a picture at the end of the day doing main quests where it's just an outline. But if you want a beautiful painting or coloring book page or whatever you want to call it, you need to do these side quests. And I think, at least so far in the opening area, they're not so abundant to where they get annoying. I know sometimes in these open world games, you just look at your map and you just want to throw up because there's 400 dots and interest points and things like that. So, but yeah, I would heavily encourage you to really indulge in those side quests and really, really flesh out your world. And I think it really adds a lot to everything. And just even characters in side quests, the voice acting is stupendous. And then there's just some new things from the old game. There's a chess-like game. The name sort of escapes me at this point, but it's a fun little distraction. I suck at it. I've cleared out the first two people doing it, but I feel like it's sort of much more trial and error than I think it's supposed to be. That could just be user error on my end, but in an open world game, you're always going to have these new little activities to do. So I think this is a serviceable one. It's at least it's not some tacky card game. I appreciate that they took an approach to a different type of game. It's got elements of chess, but then positioning and sort of a risk reward system with being able to overpower your pieces to do additional attacks or sprint to further areas and they're supposed to move. It's got some depth. I think once I get into some of the more difficult boards and players towards the end of the game, I think it's going to be a super big challenge, but I'm going to try and see it through and sort of at least try to 100% this game. So for any indication on like sort of hours played towards completion, I like to play these games very thoroughly. Like I said earlier, I have over like 200, and I think it's around 250 for my platinums, maybe 230, something like that. So I'm the type of player that likes to be incredibly thorough and do everything there is to do. So with my about 10 hours of gameplay, I'm at 12% completion. So you can really sink a lot of time into this game, and I've had nothing but good things to say. I know I see a lot of talk out there about some glitches and some visual issues. I think the only thing I've really seen is some pop in during cutscenes. But in terms of Aloy glitching or getting, I haven't seen any of that. And I've been playing it on performance mode. I didn't get any of the glistening issue that's been going around either. So, but yeah, so I guess in my early hours, those are the big takeaways from it. Definitely gonna pour a bunch of hours into it this week, and then maybe by next week's show I'll have a should be close or at least over the halfway point. That way we can see if things start to overstay their welcome or if it sort of keeps up this strong narrative and side quest beat throughout, and hopefully it keeps its quests varied and keeps doing what it's been doing for my first 10 hours for the next 40. And if it does that, it'll definitely be a pretty strong candidate for Game of the Year. But so with that wrapped up, you guys feel free to leave your early impressions of the game down in the comments. I'll try to respond to any that pop up, but let me know if you agree or what things that you've been liking about the game that I didn't touch on here in our little first impressions. And yeah, we can sort of open up a little bit of a dialogue if you guys are interested. But that's all for this week. Enjoy your week ahead. Don't forget to like the video if it's something you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel and follow us on Twitter at @cross_CTS for all updates and goings on in the world of Cross CTS. So be good to yourselves and each other. Bye. Take care.